Booktube. Well, I'm back from the land of the flat cap and the whippet, where I've been helping Shawn Standfast unpack his books, and I've got something of a haul. This is a mixture of stuff that Shawn has given me and stuff that I bought and that either arrived just before I left for Shawn's or in the time since I've been there. So first I'll go through the stuff that Shawn gave me, and then I'll go through the stuff I bought. So first, some of this is a mixture of books, DVDs and Blu-rays. So the first thing Shawn gave me was this, which is a DVD of The Stone Tape. Now, this is by Nigel Neal, who's certainly more famous for the Quatermass serials in the 1950s, as well as a something of a dud fourth serial in the late 1970s, which if you're interested in Quatermass, if you're completist with Quatermass, go and watch it. But if you're not, I'd just stick with the 3 serials he did for the BBC. However, this is a classic BBC original ghost story, and this was done as a part of a long-running series in Britain called A Ghost Story for Christmas, which usually adapted the ghost stories of M.R. James, but occasionally they would adapt other authors. For example, they did an adaptation of The Signal by Charles Dickens, and this was done. This was done in 19. See, I think it says the year here. Oh no, sorry, I think it was 1976, and it's about an electronics company that sets up in an old manor house, and there's a haunting that takes place, and this Jane Asher sees this ghost, which is a maid running up a staircase, which has no floor, no top floor, screaming. She sees it, and this is her lover, played by Michael Bryant, who's the head of the electronics department for this big sort of multinational, and he thinks that the ghost is a recording on the stone, and the stone's acting like a sort of like an old cassette tape or a CD or that sort of thing. And so he tries to, they carry out a huge amount of battery of tests against it, to try and see if they can find it, see if they can prove this theory. And it has unfortunate consequences for Jane Asher's character. Again, if you've never seen this, I really would recommend people watch it. It's really effective. It's only 90 minutes long, and Nigel Neal really does a good ghost story. And I've got to be honest, I've never watched anything that Nigel Neal wrote that I haven't liked. He seems to be one of those writers who just can put things down on paper faultlessly. Even that Quatermass serial I mentioned, which really isn't the best of, that really isn't up to the same quality as the original 50s versions, the original 50s serials. Sorry about this. Just some hiccups. It really is good. It's good. It's not. There's nothing bad for it as a program on its own. Is perfectly good, but as a part of that series, it's a bit of a dud in that sense. But as I say, on its own, if you just stand on its own, it's really good. Now, next thing I got were a couple of books. Now, this is a sci-fi author, and if you know anything about Shawn Standfast, you've probably worked out who this is. However, if you don't know, it's Clifford D. Simak, and so I've got this one, The Enchanted Pilgrimage, which I like this cover. It's very nice, very 1970s. Apparently, according to Shawn, this cover has nothing to do with the contents of the book, so I'm going to be interested to find out what that's like. Next one is Time is the Simplest Thing. I should say that Clifford D. Simak is I think he's Shawn's, if not Shawn's favourite science fiction writer, he's one of his favourites. This does look good. Again, Shawn didn't say anything about this cover, so I'm going to take it that this must have something to do with the with the actual story. So, and then finally, Off Planet. These all look really good, and Shawn, I've spoken to Shawn quite a bit about in speaking to Shawn over the time that I've known him, and going up to his house to help him sort things out. He's spoken about Simak quite a lot, and he seems like a really interesting writer for everything Shawn said about him. So I'm going to look forward to reading that, as well as another one which is in the pile that I bought. Next is Reality and Other Stories by John Lanchester. Now, I've heard of John Lanchester. He wrote a book called City about 13 years ago, and it's about a street in London just after the financial crash, and it was sort of a condition of England novel, I believe, sort of thing that Dickens used to write, which apparently was very good. It got adapted to the TV as a BBC series about a couple of years later. When I watched that, and that seemed alright, but I don't know I've never actually read his book, so I don't know whether he's good or not. So I'll be interested to see what his short stories are like. These are all described as I'll just read what it says here. Reality and Other Stories is a gathering of deliciously chilling entertainment, stories to be read as the evening draws in and the days are haunted by the uncanny technologies and the absurd horrors of modern life. So that sounds a bit M.R. Jamesy, because M.R. James, when he wrote his stories, were written to be read at a club called the Chit Chat Club in Cambridge, usually at Christmas time. And so that for me, that sounds interesting. The next one is a book I haven't read, but I know of. It's by Bram Stoker. It's one of his lesser known novels compared to Dracula, which is the Jewel of the Seven Stars. It's a mummy novel. It's actually the book. There's a very famous Hammer film called Blood on the Mummy's Tomb, and this is what inspired it. That film is great as well, particularly because the main actress is the extremely beautiful Valerie Leon. If you don't know who Valerie Leon is, Google her and you'll understand what I mean. But this is this is an annotated edition by a Clive Leatherdale. I'm not quite sure who that is, but I'll end up asking Shawn about him and he'll be able to tell me about it, because Shawn knows a great deal about a lot of books, but particularly Bram Stoker, and he's very big. He has a great deal of knowledge and history, knowledge and interest in Dracula, and I think, and I would say probably Bram Stoker in general. So I'll be able to find out more about him. But I look forward to that. The next one is 100 Selected Stories of O. Henry. I would say I've never read O. Henry, but I do know him because he was the man who coined the phrase Banana Republic in one of his story collections. And I'd be interested to see what he's like, because apparently I've read about him, and he was one of the people who sort of, along with someone like Rudyard Kipling and Ambrose Bierce and people like that in the 1880s and 1890s, sort of pioneered the short story, among others. And so I'll be interested to read these short stories, see what it's like. And I wonder I don't know if the story where he coins the phrase Banana Republic is in there, so if it is, I'll be interested to read that as well. The next one is extremely nice. The book itself is nice, but I'll be even more interested to read it because it's an author who I have some interest in. It's The Telltale Heart and Other Stories by Edgar Allan Poe, who almost everybody's heard of him. And I have read The Telltale Heart before, and The Pit and the Pendulum. So I'll be interested to read the other ones and actually reread The Telltale Heart. I'll actually look and see what the other stories are in here. There's MS Found in the Bottle, The Fall of the House of Usher, which I've heard of but I've never read, and I've also heard of there's obviously the Coleman film, which I've seen bits of, but again I've never seen that through. But at some point I want to get that and watch it. Massacre of Red Death, Pit and Pendulum, obviously The Telltale Heart, The Black Cat, Ligia. I I've most certainly pronounced that incorrectly, but I know that was also another one of the that got adapted. All the name was also one of the Corman Poe films. So again, I'll be interested to read through that. And the next one, this is unlike the rest in the sense because this is actually non-fiction. It's Mayhew's London, and so it's a non-fiction account of. Just make sure. Yeah, it's about it was a contemporary account of London in the Victorian era, particularly the 1850s and 60s. Mayhew wrote a very famous book called London Labour and the London Poor, which sort of as a sort of important book in Victorian social history, written at the time. So this will be interesting to read, just to see what give a bit more depth into the period, which I'm interested in. People obviously know I'm interested in history from some of the stuff I've done, so that should be interesting to look at, to sort of dip into occasionally. And then finally, this is a collection of stories that are predicting future wars. So it's called The Tales of the Next War, 1871 to 1914. Oh, sorry, 1871 to 1914. And it's edited by a man called I.F. Clarke. Speaking to Shawn about this, I.F. Clarke has done quite a number of these books, and I saw that Shawn himself had a few of them on his shelves, and so I'm interested to look at this because there's a number of I've read a number of these what we'll know as invasion fiction. So there's the Battle of Dorking, which is in here, and then there's the Invasion of 1910, which was William the Clue in published in 1906, and those two are both about German invasion of Britain, and obviously written. Also, Dorking's interesting because I should say the Battle of 1910 is sort of written in this sort of build up to the First World War, and it very much it sort of exemplifies the British fears of Germany's rise. But Dorking was written in the early, in fact, it should say the date in here. It's 1871. Let's see. Yes, it was written in 1871, and it's about again the German invasion of Britain, but written, I think, written in the immediate aftermath of the Franco-Prussian War, which the British government didn't think wasn't particularly bothered about in terms of intervening in, and Germany's unification was not regarded as a bad thing or as something to be feared. How wrong they were, but this book is interesting because the author, who's an army officer called Chesney, clearly regarded this as a worry and put his feelings down in this book, which is it's an interesting read. I've not read it for quite a while, but I'm looking forward to rereading it again. Rereading, but I'm not sure if it's the whole thing or part of it. But I'll be looking forward to reading this, and then if it's not, I'll buy the whole thing. But in this here, there's also other ones which are non-British. There's a couple of German ones. There's a French one. There's an interesting one here. I've just noticed the name. The Secret of the Army Aeroplane by A. Mill, who was probably more well known for being the author of Winnie the Pooh. And then there's there's one here from Arthur Conan Doyle. Danger, being the log of Captain John Sirius, 1914. So that's probably right before the First World War. So I'm going to look forward to sort of reading through these and seeing what it's like, to see how much they accurately got in terms of predicting the way that warfare was going to go. Because H.G. Wells wrote a number of books and short stories that cover before the First World War about a future war, and he was able to get not just the idea of tanks, as he called them, were land ships, correct, but also he was able to get aerial warfare and even more, predicting things even more in the future. He predicted the use of nuclear weapons and the effect that it would have on have when they were used, which is definitely interesting. So that'll be interesting to look through, to read. Now these ones I'm going to show you next are ones that I bought, that I bought and either arrived just before I went or whilst I was away. So the first is Dracula by Bram Stoker. This I'm going to be reading as part of, in May, as a part of Vampiril and Maypire, which is Brandy, which Brandy started last year, and I'm going to read that in May as part of it. I'm also in May, as a part of our event, I'm going to be reading The Vampire by John Polidori. Though this one has all the stories in it, and I'll just see what they are. There's An Evening Sagai Evelyn's Dream by Horace Smith. The Confessions of a Reformed Ribbonman, William Carlton. Monos and Diamos by Edward Bulwer. Some Terrible Letters from Scotland by James Hogg. I've got to say, I don't know these names. Though the last one I do know, Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, The Passage in Secret History of an Irish Countess. So that will be interesting to read, because I've read Carmilla by Le Fanu and I enjoyed it. So another story, particularly that's another vampire story, should be interesting to read. So I'll be certainly reading Polidori. Polidori's The Vampire, and I may read some of others for Maypire, for April, Vampire and Maypire, but I'm not sure yet. I'll let people know. I'll do videos during the course of that when I've read things, and I'll say it then. So the next one will also be for Vampiril and Maypire, which is The Black Vampire by Uriah Derrick Darcy. This one I learned about last year because of from Shawn Standfast, who read it. And it's the first black vampire story, and it's clearly by the name and from the stuff I've read about it, inspired by Polidori's The Vampire. But this has references to the slave trade, the Haitian Revolution, and various other things around at the time, so it should be interesting to read. Shawn did say that it's a bit of a slog, but from what he said, it seemed to have value for what it was, not necessarily for how it was written, which should be interesting to read. If only to see what a reaction to Polidori's story was. This sort of literary reaction to Polidori's story. Now the next one is The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, and it's also got in it the When the Sleeper Awakes and the Chronic Argonauts. Now I've never read When the Sleeper Awakes, but I have read the Chronic Argonauts, because that is sort of H.G. Wells' first attempt at a time travel story. It has some links with it seemed to the sort of thing that H.G. Wells not so much, he didn't so much base the Time Machine on, but it's sort of his first attempt. It's not so much a first draft of the Time Machine, but you can see where the Time Machine comes from, and I enjoyed that. I've read the Time Machine numerous times before. There's a very good, though it's very hard to find, and I've not been able to find since, radio sort of audio adaptation done in the style of a sort of 30s 40s radio play by Leonard Nimoy and John, I forgot his name now. He played Q in Star Trek. People who know that will know the name. Looks very much like the late Paul Eddington, the actor, and they did an adaptation of this. It was really good, with Leonard Nimoy playing the time traveller, and it's done with the name in the 90s under a company called Alien Voices, and they seem to have gone bust. But if you can find that Alien Voices radio version of this, I really would advise you to find it and give it a listen, because it's really good. However, the reason I've got this is because I'm going to be reading this as a part of New Worlds November. along with another, along with I'm trying to think where else I want to read. Something else, but I could, well, it's going to be this. It's going to be The Werewolf Principle by Clifford D. Simak, which is also to do with also to be a part of Shawn Standfast's Simak read along. And then, oh yes, there's another book I'll have to find it out, which is which is about an Edison Aid book, which were a series of books that were written inspired by the inventions of Thomas Edison. That was early science fiction, which I'll read out as well. Read that. That'll be read along with The Werewolf Principle and H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. Now the next one is also in connection with Shawn's Simak read along, which is City, which Shawn's going to be reading in this coming March. So I'll be reading that. I'll be interested to find this, because this is one of Shawn's favourite novels, and Shawn has said it's one of the best sci-fi novels. So I'll be really interested to read that, and also this will be my first experience with Simak as well. So it'll give me a good idea of whether I like his stuff or not, especially with those other ones I've got. The next one is a political biography of Sir Oswald Mosley by Robert Skidelsey. I'm interested in Mosley as a political figure because he is mythologized by both those who like him, so neo-Nazis, neo-fascists, and so on, but also the British left mythologize him as sort of the devil. I mean, I regard both sides as mythologizing the man in a way which ignores the reality of him, which is that he was frankly a self-promoting political opportunist who, if in the early 1930s communism had been on the uptick, he would have joined the British Communist Party, not founded the British Union of Fascists. His political beliefs Oswald political beliefs were, Oswald's political commitment was to Oswald Mosley and nothing else. And it will be interesting to read this because I believe that shows because of his commitment, his political career before 1932, when the Fascist Party is founded, what was the new party becomes the Fascist Party, because he was elected in 1918 as a Tory MP. Then he sat as an independent. Then he joined the Labour Party. Then he left the Labour Party in a huff because Philip Snowden, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, wouldn't act on his economic advice, and then he found a new party, which becomes his economic advice was essentially proto-Keynesianism, and new party is founded roughly on their idea and boarding a new way in politics, and then he goes to, I think he goes to Italy. Between the founding of the new party and the founding of British Union of Fascists, he goes to Italy, sees Mussolini's state, and then comes back as a fascist. And so this should be interesting to read. And I've read some of Skidelsky's books before, and I've enjoyed him as a writer. So reading about Mosley should be interesting. Now the next lot are all DVDs and Blu-rays. So the first one is This is a film based on an Edgar Wallace story called The Flying Squad. Interesting because it's got a very young Jack Hawkins in. If you see there, it's there. That's it. So it'd be interesting to see what Jack Hawkins looks and sounds like. Sounds like a film from 1940. Shawn, when I mentioned this to Shawn, he said that his voice doesn't fit his face, in the sense that he has Jack Hawkins' voice, but it just simply doesn't fit how young he is. So that should be interesting to find out. and I've watched a couple of things based on Edgar Wallace stories, and they're good. I found them interesting, particularly the Dead Eyes of London. I watched that last time I was at Shawn's, and I really enjoyed that. With it, that has Bela Lugosi. And the next one is Rosamund Pilcher's Four Seasons. I quite like Rosamund Pilcher as a writer. I've read a couple of her books and enjoyed them. Her books have been adapted quite a few times on TV, particularly in Germany. This is an Anglo-German production, and in Germany they seem to particularly like her stories. In fact, interestingly, that's also true of Edgar Wallace, who has a huge number in the post-war era. A huge number of Edgar Wallace stories were adapted in West Germany, and I think there still are. And as I say, Rosamund Pilcher has also been adapted. This is about a family in Cornwall of the Coombe family, and I saw this about when it was usually on Channel 5 in Britain about 2013-14, and I enjoyed watching it, so I'll be interested to watch it again, see if it is good. The actors in it, as you can see, so you got Michael York, Tom Conti, Frank Finley is in it, I believe, as the father of the group. Oh yeah, and Juliet Mills. So it should be. I remember enjoying it, so I'll be interested to see what it's like now, if I still enjoy it, because I haven't read Rosamund Pilcher in a few years. I remember reading. Last thing I read was The Winter Solstice, which I really enjoyed. Next one is the 2013 version of The Great Gatsby by Baz Luhrmann. I enjoyed this, watching it the first time. I've watched it a couple of times since, so I'll be interested to watch this. And also, I can see it's got a couple of features, special features, which I'll be interested to watch, because I do like those, so that'll be quite good to watch. Then I've got From Hell, the film, which is an adaptation of the Alan Moore graphic novel. It's about it's about Jack the Ripper, and it very much plays into what I regard as sort of utterly false conspiracy theory that the Freemasons and the royal family committed the murders to cover up, in this case, an illegitimate child of the Prince of not the Prince of Wales, of the second in line to the throne at the time. That was first up posited by Stephen Knight in his book. I've forgotten the name of it now. Terrible book, bloody awful. It's conspiracy bunkum, but the film itself I enjoy. Not particularly historically accurate, understandably so, given the stuff, given the plot, but still, I still enjoyed it. It's got a commentary. It says it's got on here filming of video and an audio commentary, so that should be good. Now, my final two are one is my favourite film, and one is an adaptation of a book by one of my favourite author who also did the book of the first. These are both adaptations of James Wheatley novels, and I'm a big fan of James Wheatley. The first is The Devil Rides Out from 1960. Let's see. 67. This is a great film. It's arguably one of the greatest Hammer films ever made, if not the greatest. And it stars Christopher Lee as a hero, and Charles Gray, as you can see on the front cover, as the villain. Really good. It's also a great adaptation of the original novel, where it's not strictly it's not a page by page faithful adaptation, but it gets Wheatley on screen. It gets the spirit of Wheatley's novels on, not just his novel, but Wheatley's novels in general on screen, and it's really good. It has numerous iconic sort of stills, iconic images from iconic images from this film. The very famous one of Christopher Lee and the main sort of heroes all lying lying in a pentagram, lying in the middle of a library with a pentagram and stuff drawn, and they're all sort of lying head to head, and it's really interesting. That's really iconic and really good. The last one is To the Devil a Daughter from 1976, I believe. Let me just look. Yeah, this was actually the last Hammer film made in its original run in the 70s, and it again is an adaptation of a Wheatley novel. It's not very faithful, and it doesn't really get Wheatley well, but it's enjoyable. It's an enjoyable film to watch, and I like it. I'm going to be interested to watch it because it's got got some extras. It's got a documentary on there. I don't think it's got a no, I don't think there's an audio commentary track on there, but there is on this one, so I'll be interested to listen to, and I'll be interested to watch. So that's everything I've had. That's all. That's my haul, and it's going to be interesting to watch their films and get through these books. I'm not sure if I'll get through all these this year, but I'll get through a good portion of them. There's some of which obviously I will, like the Simac and Dracula, and the other vampire ones I'll be reading for in May for Vampire and Magpie. So with that, Booktube, I'll say goodbye.